Okay, we'll just give it a second to make sure everybody's with us this morning, this afternoon, this evening. Okay, fantastic. So let's get started. I'd like to send a warm welcome out to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jackie Kassteen, and I am the owner and managing director of Jackfruit Marketing. We help institutions and organizations around the world with their international recruitment, their branding, and their marketing. And we've been working with BMI for several years now. The team there is just an absolute joy to work with, as I'm sure many of you know. They have so much energy and such a great team spirit. And together, we've all been working really hard this year to bring you the first ever online edition of the Global Scholarship Summit and Symposium. And we know the online version is not quite as glamorous as perhaps it is in previous years, but we're here together now. And when the time is right, we'll all be together again in person. And I'm sure we all look forward to that. So I hope that your summit meetings have been positive and productive, and that you've had a chance to watch some of the recordings from the sessions that took place on Monday. I'm delighted to serve as your symposium director this week, and I'm so pleased that all of you have been able to join us for what I hope will be an informative and uplifting panel discussion today. So before we do introduce our panel to y'all, I just got a little bit Southern there, which is strange because I'm not from the South, but anything can happen in these days and times. Yeah.
You went all Yankee on us.
That's right. I haven't had enough coffee, clearly. So I'll do a little bit of housekeeping to help those of you who are watching from home or office today and help you get involved. You'll see the chat window on your screen there. So go ahead and use that to say hello to your fellow participants, share something with the group. You can type in a question there, or you can use the Q&A section as well. And also, don't be shy. You can raise your hand. Our attendees are muted just for convenience, but raise your hand and we can also let you speak as well and ask a question. That's what makes these live performances so engaging and so much more valuable for you. So don't be shy. Let us know if you have something that you'd like to ask our panelists. And yeah, let's begin. I'm going to stop screen sharing so you can see everyone here that's with us today. So I'd like to introduce our illustrious panel. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Shakir Almahasna, the Talent Program Manager of the Saudi Telecommunication Company. We also have with us Mr. Joel Di Pasquale, the Senior Manager of Government and Scholarship Engagement at Monash University in Australia. And we've got Dr. Joel Tyndall, the Associate Professor and Associate Dean International of Health Sciences from the University of Otago, all the way out in New Zealand. So we've had a nice, good geographic spread for you this morning or this afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I'd like to kick off by talking a bit about priority areas. This came up in our conversations on Monday, and we've been looking at how scholarship funding organizations might be changing some of the areas that they're looking at in their partner institutions. Let's say looking a bit more, of course, STEM degrees always very popular, but perhaps looking more towards the arts and social sciences. I thought perhaps we could discuss that today. Gentlemen, what have you been seeing in terms of priority areas and demand from students and from scholarship organizations?
I'm happy to start. So from a Monash perspective, we've seen a definite move from undergraduate to postgraduate or bachelor's degree to master's. There's been a definite trend from scholarship agencies. We've also seen a move from social sciences to the sciences, STEM, and also in our case, a very strong move to health and allied health. And I think with COVID, I suspect the health will become much more important as well, particularly nursing and medical and allied health.
Yeah, I can concur with my colleague Joe that we have a strong request growth in the health sciences, but also in postgraduate areas as well.
And we've put actually more emphasis on, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've put actually more emphasis on postgraduate, so we've been growing our postgraduate programs to cater for that demand as well. So historically, we haven't had any science or engineering postgrad, but we've now created that in the last 3 years, we've had about 20 new postgrad programs in that science and engineering area.
So from our side in Saudi Arabia, there's been a dramatic shift on the way we handle the scholarship, or the Saudi government, and I'm not here to speak on behalf of the Ministry of Higher Education, but the shift is huge in terms of everything. There is a shift that happened due to Vision 2030. And if you've had a look at the specializations and universities, Ministry of Higher Education is going to deal with, they have changed drastically. So in terms of more majors, you would see things related to music, to art, to technology, specifically to tourism. And that shift is a shift that would help executing Vision 2030. That's on one side of the story. On the other side of the story, and due to the pandemic, the shift is not only in the medical field. The data science played a major role in drastically reducing the number of COVID-19 cases in Saudi Arabia. So we went up all the way to 5,000, but due to technologies like mobile app technologies and data science, the Saudi government cooperated aggressively with the different telecommunication company. They came up with different applications. So there is a boom on this side also. So technology is an issue. And the third paradigm is the quality of education. We believe in Saudi Arabia, we've reached a level where our national universities have improved in terms of quality on the undergrads level. So the scholarships in Saudi Arabia were announced 2 weeks ago only, and they announced only 70 universities worldwide that we're gonna deal with. So whoever a Saudi and high school graduate and gets an unconditional acceptance from these 7 universities will get an automatic scholarship.
Get an automatic, sorry, what was that?
Will get a scholarship automatically, I mean. So once you get enrollment on those top 70 universities worldwide, if you get an enrollment there unconditional, you can only apply through the website of Ministry of Higher Education, and you will get your scholarship automatically or electronically.
Okay, and I think the big question everyone always wonders is, who are those 70? How do you get on the list? And how is that list generated? Traditionally, always from rankings. We were talking about that on Monday as well, and there would seem to be more of a trend to move towards less of a focus on rankings and more of a focus on the quality of the student experience, and also a bit of work integrated experience came up, and softer skills. Shakar, what do you think about that? You mentioned 70, so this sounds like a very defined list. Is it purely based on rankings? What can you tell us?
It's based on two things. It's based on ranking and also based on quality of outcomes. So we've had an experience of 10 years where the Saudi government scholarship probably more than 500,000 Saudis during those 10 years. Now they're back to the industry, they're back to work. So depending on the quality, and I think the Ministry of Higher Education was very specific this time. They know which universities we want to deal with. So 2 factors, ranking plus quality of outcomes.
Okay. And in terms of funding, how has the funding shifted? That's, again, another one that came up on Monday as well. We heard from Kenya that quite uplifting news that more funding would be coming through for Kenyan students to go abroad. Mexico, a little bit more difficult in the near-term future, let's say. Shakar, what can you tell us about the funding situation? Of course, we're facing some tougher economic times ahead due to the pandemic. However, the mood seems quite bright out of the Middle East as well. So could you maybe look into the crystal ball, as it were, and maybe give us a little bit of an insight on what you see going forward in terms of funding for students?
Funding of students is still aggressive in Saudi Arabia. There is a big concentration on education, on quality education. So two areas that come on top of the Saudi government priorities is the quality of education and the medical conditions of the people. So funding will continue as aggressive as it was. However, the concentration, as I said, is only on equality. That's from the government side, but I'm speaking from STC umbrella today. Funding on education and development continues to be aggressive. We believe on education, we believe on higher education, and we believe on continuous education and development. So I do not see a reduction in funding, despite that we're going to reduce the number of scholarships. However, if you look at the funding within the scholarship, the Saudi government has raised up the amount of the monthly stipend, and they concentrated also on those who are going for higher education, on funding their families for education abroad. So I don't think they look at it from purely financial perspective. Rather, they look at it from quality perspective.
Okay. And in terms of quality and coming back to experience again, what can you tell us? Obviously, being from a telecommunications company, you're funding a lot of training programs abroad. So I would imagine that work integrated learning and work experience abroad would take quite a priority, let's say, over perhaps a heavy research focus. But I could be wrong. So maybe you could enlighten me a bit about that. What do you look for in your partners in terms of that student experience?
From our side, on the industry, we believe on both. So if you look at the program I'm managing today, shadowing and internship experience is quite important. So I would, for example, in STC, by policy, I have the capability to send our employees for up to 24 months shadowing program with an international organization, where they will get work experience from that. At the same time, I'm capable of sending our employees to do scholarships outside. We believe more on practical experience, but also we believe in education. So we're doing both here and there. Definitely working with international organizations would bring back experience, but not only that, it will bring back businesses to the company. We have heavy improvement, and we have refreshed our strategy this year. And the letter E, expansion, is quite aggressive. We're going to invest more on bringing mergers, acquisitions, acquiring new startups from all over the world. So that's very important also for us.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's sounding good. I can't help but turn to the impact of COVID and talk a bit about how that's affecting the student experience, let's say, and how that might be affecting funding. So for example, are you allowing students to put their funding on hold until, let's say, full mobility resumes? Are you finding that some of your funded students, Shakir, are delaying their decisions? Some of them, of course, are starting online with a view to transitioning in person when borders do open up and visas can come through and so on. What's your experience in Saudi Arabia so far, and your funded student experience like?
We do not wait in Saudi telecommunication company, and that is a very interesting question. We flipped the second day we had the quarantine in Saudi Arabia and curfew. We flipped completely to working from home. And when we experienced that for 2 or 3 months, we also experienced how loyal STC employees were. So we changed everything to online. Not only that, after this happened, employees have proven that they are highly productive working remotely. STC was ready more than any organization in Saudi Arabia and maybe in Middle East. That's why we had a decision to completely change the work policy. And we today are working from home completely, not from home. It's actually working from anywhere. We do not believe anymore on working in premises unless you have to deal with certain equipments, and those equipments are in the location. So most of the company employees are working remotely. We permanently changed the work policy, so people do not have to report from offices. They will go to offices whenever they are required or they need to be there. So consequently, given this fact, we've shifted all of our education and training programs to online until this pandemic vanishes. But stopping business is not a viable idea in STC. STC is moving like a train. It's difficult to stop it. Even in education, we do a lot of online scholarships now. Until the pandemic vanishes, then we might, go back completely to normal. But to answer your question, no, we're not stopping at all.
Okay, good to hear. Yes, the train is not stopping. I love it. Joel and Joe, what's been your experience? Obviously, yes, we're all working in a new way now, and sometimes that's more of a struggle for the staff than it is for the students even. What's been your experience so far?
Yeah, Joe, if I might go first, I guess with both countries being island nations, it's good and bad in that we have shut the borders, and in New Zealand in particular, we've been very lucky in that we've got on top of the pandemic. And I think today there was only 2 cases, one in isolation and one historic, so effectively none. We're working at a normal level. We were lecturing at a normal level until lectures stopped because of exams and the students are finishing up for their summer holidays. But in March, we were given, I think, 2 or 3 days and we were shutting down to level 4 and we shifted to online teaching. It wasn't an educated decision to go, but it was a necessary. However, I think we've all done it. But as you mentioned before, the staff have done very well to do it as well. But that's the thing. We've done it. We've jumped in. I think a lot of it, we've surprised ourselves at what we can do, and obviously looked at and discovered a whole lot of new technology and new ways to do it. On the flip side, for us, New Zealand in particular, our borders remain closed. So we can't accept new students for next year coming into the country. And you mentioned about students here now. Students, I guess, are lucky in New Zealand. But if they do wish to go home, it's a big decision for them because the borders are still closed. And obviously we have to deal with students potentially being homesick, away from their family and friends and their own culture. But we like to pride ourselves on strong pastoral care and a good student experience. And one thing we're putting forward, which is launched next week, I think, is the summer in Dunedin. So international students who are staying in Dunedin because they effectively need to. We're putting on various events for them to join in and enjoy themselves over the break time.
Excellent. And out of curiosity for both Joel and Joe, what percentage of classes are being taught face-to-face versus blended versus completely online now? Because you do have the cases pretty much well controlled over there, which we're all very envious of.
I might just add, at Monash, we switched all our courses, all our subjects to online, apart from the practicums, pretty quickly. So our first semester, I think by first or second week, we'd switched to online. And we've been online and not on campus since April. So it's been quite a long time now. So our state went into lockdown several months ago. So we've been working from home effectively. But because we went online, it made things a lot easier. But the other big learnings was online assessment. So we had to switch to online assessment. And what we found, that was much more effective than the traditional assessment tests we have at end of semester. And it's likely we'll never go back to that. We'll do online assessment from now on. So that's one of the learnings and one of the good things, or probably one of the few good things to come out of this whole process was the online assessment process, because we've developed very sophisticated technology to monitor cheating and attendance. And I think our students don't quite realise what we can do, but we do have a few tricks up our sleeves.
Yeah, I'd have to agree on the assessment. Moving away from paper to electronic was amazing, and we'll do it when we can, and only go back if we have to. But yeah, with the lab-based courses, and in particular the clinical-based courses, they have suffered a little with lockdowns, because whilst we can teach didactically online, it's quite difficult doing laboratory-based teaching without a laboratory, or with a virtual patient. Whilst you can do it to some extent, it's challenging. But one of our priorities since this came up to light in February has been to support our existing scholarship students with strong communication and a single type of communication across the university. We've also been communicating with our sponsors as well to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, and letting them know that we're doing what we can to the point of what we are able to do.
I think that's an important point. You have to manage your communications very centrally, and it can only be one message. So there can only be one point of truth. So literally every single communications that gets sent out by the university is approved by a university committee of marketing and the executive. And that's been every single message. So it's been very complicated, but I think you have to have a very clear message. There can't be any it has to be black and white, basically, because there's too much confusion, there's too much concern. So you have to have a very clear, strong message. And we've been very strong in how we presented our message to our community, to our sponsors, and also to our students. The other thing we've looked for too is our alumni. We've actually asked our alum to provide scholarships for our students who don't have any funding or are having financial issues. So our international students, a lot of our international students actually lost work because of the lockdown. So many actually didn't have an income, because in Australia you can work up to 20 hours a week, but that was cut for a lot of students. So we called on our alum and our big donors, and I think they provided over $1 million to help support our student cohort during this pandemic.
That is very, very encouraging to hear. Oh yes, Joel, please jump in.
Yeah, we had a
No,
similar...
Joel, beat me. Don't get competitive.
We're all friends here today.
I was just going to say, I was really supportive of Monash as an alumni from there back in the, when was it, the 90s? But no, we provided support to our international students under the hardship, a hardship fund put together by the university. So it's been very good for everyone, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, and it's also our state government has provided funding as well and support to international students, which has been very generous and well received by our community, because whereas we went into lockdown and got support, financial support, if you weren't working, our international students didn't get that. So they weren't eligible for financial support. So we had to use other means to try and support our student cohort.
Excellent. So strong messaging, strong support for students, a collective spirit as well of coming together between the staff, between the students and the alumni to really get that message out that we are all in this together. Very important. And, you know, I'm curious, Joe, Monash is a big university system. When you talk about centralizing marketing messages, obviously as a marketing company, you know, this is a keen interest and extremely important. I think students and parents will be looking very carefully at what institutions did in the crisis, how they managed the students' experience and looked after them. But with such a big university, do you find some difficulties in terms of getting those messages out quickly enough? Because it can be hard, let's say, to get that decision making happening fast enough with things changing on almost a daily basis sometimes. Maybe you could share a bit of that.
Yeah.
And Joel as well, please.
Sure. at the peak of the crisis, our central management committee were actually meeting daily as a crisis team, and they were approving everything almost on a daily basis. I don't think we met on a daily basis now, but it was on a daily basis, and we were just responding, talking to government, talking internally as well, trying to make decisions when we actually had no idea what was happening. It was very complicated. The problem was it does take time to craft a message. So sometimes we went as quick as we could have been, but it's like any organisation. You need to have a process, and you need to have people able to make decisions. But it sometimes takes some time to make some decisions. But that's just the reality of a big organisation. But I think we were pretty effective because we're fairly consistent, and people got on board, and there was a lot of support internally for the central messaging as well. And we're still using a central messaging approach, even though we're mostly over the crisis, but I think it's still important that we have a consistent message. But yeah, it's not easy, especially for an organisation as big as our university.
Great. Joel, Shocker, anything to add to that in terms of communications?
I think we were in a similar situation. There was management were meeting regularly. I'm trying to remember, things have happened so quickly that we may have been getting within our division emails from the PVC daily. But yeah, we've been fortunate to have really strong communication systems. And importantly, our academics are all close to our students as well. So yeah, I think we've come out of this well.
Yeah, and one thing we did was we had one web page that basically had all the information that everyone needed, and everyone was pointed to that website constantly. So no one had some other website. It could only be one, and I think that was important to keep that truth, single source of truth. And I think that worked. But I think most universities probably would have done the same.
And Shocker, how are you communicating with some of your students? Do you have a rough idea in terms of what percentage of them might still be abroad? Perhaps they are, learning online, but they're still in that foreign country, versus how many did come back to Saudi Arabia? Did you bring everybody back home? What's been the situation with your students?
Yeah, we had to bring everybody back to the country very quickly. We were so proactive in taking these actions. So very quickly we communicated with students and universities. And probably we had only a case where, he got he hanged in Amsterdam, I remember, and he stayed there for 2 months, and then he was back to the country. But as a company, there is more focus on people. There is a very, very strong focus on these as I'm dealing with the top 2% talented employees in the organization. Their work-life balance is quite important to us. So we were very proactive in dealing with the pandemic. We brought them back to the country safely. And I think that was a very seamless experience from a STC perspective.
Okay, great. And do you have a sense of when outbound mobility might continue? Do you think for September we might see students getting back out there, or you might start to encourage your students to go back out for September time? I know it's difficult for all of us to say, of course, but if we have a rough idea, perhaps, or some plans that are in the works.
Generally, depending on where they do their scholarships and the situation of the country they are studying in. But also, I don't think in STC you're gonna send back any employee until a decent vaccination come into the picture. It's a very serious issue. We're not gonna risk the life of our employees whatsoever. So again, 2 conditions: the situation of the country and the vaccination.
Okay. But without a vaccine and with the situation, let's say, still in play, the message I was getting before, Shocker, so just to reconfirm, is that the train isn't stopping. They will continue online then. Is that right?
Yeah, they'll continue their education online Fortunately, most of the scholarships we do are on the graduate level. So, you know, being there, being remote is, I think, is quite enough at this situation. But when things get resolved, things get easier, the pandemic vanishes, people definitely will go back to the countries they study, because the cultural experience and the networking is quite an aspect of what we're doing.
And I was curious about that in terms of a shift. And again, that came up in our Monday panel. One silver lining to COVID is that it has enabled us to be more flexible with our entry requirements, with our exam requirements and assessment requirements. And so I was wondering, do you think that going forward that online education would rise in terms of acceptance? Traditionally, it has been difficult to get that acceptance from governments, from employers as well. So do you think this is a sea change now for us? Or do you feel like once the borders open up and everyone is comfortable and safe traveling again, we go back to that and online is still just a nice to have? Any thoughts?
Well, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, John, please.
Oh, sorry. Well, just from a Monash perspective, so we actually are developing fully online courses, and we also do micro-credentialing as well. So there's a whole suite of programs being developed. We've actually created a new centre for professional education to grow that kind of cohort. So we'll have probably about 10, 15 masters fully online, everything from business management, project management, MBA as well, and some of the engineering programs. So I think you'll see a much stronger emphasis on online. Also, the Australian government has put emphasis on micro-credentialing and online. So they've given universities funding. So there's also a government driver as well for us to do more online and in that short course space as well. So I think that's actually one of the trends you'll see in the future.
Yeah, I can only agree with Joe. We're doing very similar things. I mean, it have been for a while. We've had distance learning for a long time. But yeah, that's more of a shift to developing new online courses.
And probably the other issue is that some governments are now starting to recognise education done online. So we had an issue with the Chinese government not recognising online education. So we had to go through that process to convince them, and not just our university, but the whole sector, that online education is an equivalent and it's the same thing as on-campus study. So there was a change in Chinese policy, I think, early in the year, and I think maybe India is looking at the same thing as well.
And what about from a Saudi person? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'll just say, as those government regulations change in other countries, you'll see more student demand as well.
So it takes a few leaders to start the process. Yeah. And Shakir, what about from a Saudi perspective? Do you think they'll come on board?
Well, I think things will change, and the change will not start necessarily from the government and schools management side. There will be, this is my personal anticipation, by the way, there will be a resistance from the student side to go to the schools again, due to the fact is that they will realize that doing it remotely is quite enough, and in some of the cases is even better than doing it in a class. So the resistance will start from the students rather than from the schools. This is the first factor. The second one is the facilities, the availability of more facilities at this stage will not be needed as aggressively as it used to be in the past. Governments will realize that so many things can be done from home better than doing them from schools. It will take a little bit of time, but definitely as the pandemic expands and as the duration of working remotely and working from home and studying from home expands, definitely there will be more resistance. I can see this on my kids, from my kids' side, and I can see this from the employees' side in different organizations. So going to online is a must, inevitable, and definitely governments will consider really changing the holistic structure of schools and universities. This is my personal anticipation of what is going to go on in the future.
Okay, great. Let's talk a bit about on the ground resources. And Joe, you mentioned alumni being and Joel as well, extremely important to rely on your on the ground resources in terms of alumni. But even, of course, donations can come from alumni anywhere. What else has been working for you? Monash has an extensive branch campus network. Joe, maybe you could tell us a bit more about how you've been able to communicate with the other branches, how you see that helping the institution going forward in terms of more options for students who might not be able to get into Australia.
So I'll give you one example. So one of the things, we have two very big master's programs, Master of Banking and Finance and Master of Business, massive postgraduate programs with like 700 students. Quite a significant component of those students are actually from China. So what we're now doing is offering those two courses at our China campus. Now, we don't have permission to run them and award degrees in business in China, but we're giving that as a physical location. Our students can enroll as online students, but actually sit in our campus in China, and they'll have tutoring support from our on-ground staff, but we'll still do the teaching online and via Zoom. So, and that's been, I think we've offered up to 300 places through that program. And it's an experiment to see how we use our network of campuses better. And we're also looking at our Malaysia campus, which is quite a big campus as well, to give students the opportunity to study at other countries, but then move to Australia once the country has actually been opened up. So at the moment, our borders are closed, and they'll probably be closed until probably first semester next year. So we're still trying to provide opportunities for our students to have some kind of on-campus experience and use our network a lot better. And that's just one example of using our branch campuses.
And if I might add some similar things, whilst we only have, we have several campuses in New Zealand, but none offshore, but we have various programs, postgraduate in particular, PhD and master's programs, where we currently are able to start students in their own country, and they can join when the borders do open, but we can also have them co-supervised by partner institutions as well. So that seems to be working and developing quite well as we move forward. So we're looking to see what other opportunities we do have. But we find that we have been doing similar things for PhDs for a number of years now. But I mean, I think having the on-campus experience is a significant positive, particularly when we're dealing with health and sciences, where you've got practical components of the courses and the training, the clinical training in particular, whereby it simply can't be done online.
And I'm glad you mentioned partners, actually. Maybe you can share a bit, some stories for us in terms of strategic alliances, how it's been working for you with strengthening some of those partnerships with institutions overseas. Perhaps we see more of a rise in joint degrees, dual degrees, for example. How have your partnerships changed in the last 6 to 10 months? How do you see them changing in the next 6 to 12 months?
I think we do need to be more flexible and communicate as much as we can, but we're not changing that much. Again, with the on-campus experience, which we also pride ourselves on, one of the few, if not the only, campus town in Australasia, campus city. So it's a great experience to come here, and the students live amongst us, as it were. You walk through the student suburbs. So we're simply trying to ensure that the students have a good experience, and if they're, say, held up, we're going to put in interim measures to make sure that we can continue with our relationships with our partners.
Great. Anything else to add? Perhaps in terms of challenges or opportunities that you might see going forward with partnerships?
it's the obvious challenge is the big question of when and what if. I understand that we probably won't be accepting international students until into next year, but we won't know what is going to be happening until the government makes a decision, and that will be similar across the world. So the biggest thing we don't know is the unknown.
It'll be the same for Australia. We're totally dependent on the Australian government opening up the borders, and at this stage it doesn't look like they'll open until next year. And the other issue for us is airlines. So our main airline is Qantas, and it's not it's stopped taking bookings from the UK and the US until October 2021. So that's going to have another impact as well. So I think it's going to be tough times next year for most universities in the world, not just our universities.
That's true.
So
we're all feeling, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have to think our model. Our model may have to change, and we may never have the model we used to have pre-COVID. You know, our model was to go in internationally, be big, and have some very strong markets. For Monash, it was China. Other universities, it tends to be India and the subcontinent and the Middle East. But that model may have to change, and we may need to rethink the way we operate. We just don't know.
Certainly gives us an opportunity to experiment now. If you can't experiment now, then you never will, right?
Never.
Now is the time to give it your all, and to I mean, I think most of us can say that all of us in this industry have probably worked harder this year and done more new things this year and tried new things that we thought might not have been possible or might have gotten resistance in the past. Now, at least, again, that silver lining trying to come through that we don't resist now. We have the appetite for change because it's you have to change. Otherwise, there's no option, let's say. Okay, and let's talk a little bit about the students, keeping them in focus. Perhaps the students have been able to roll with the punches even easier than us oldies. How are you monitoring the student satisfaction and their academic progress during these times, or even in general? It's often important for us as funding organizations, providing a scholarship experience for students abroad. How are you measuring their academic performance and their satisfaction when they come back home as well? How can you capture some of those success stories and capture, let's say, the alumni success stories of the funded students in particular? Any thoughts on that?
I actually think it's almost too soon to say anything. We literally within my department, our exam board meeting was today, so we don't know the results. I don't know the confirmed results of second semester. We will be doing more than our usual surveying of students and focus groups and looking at results. Students are always driven to do their course, so they're here for a reason, and they'll do what they can.
One of the big Sorry, I'll just say one of the big issues for us is that because we've moved to online, a lot of our internet students have now taken up part-time study. So historically, you've had to have a full load. So you would do 4 subjects per semester. Because they've all switched to online, and many are not even in the country, we've seen quite a few students go up part-time. So they're only doing part-time load. So that should make it a little bit easier and for them to manage. So maybe the social and the isolation might not be as big a problem. We don't know, but that's been a definite trend. But they've just reduced their load, which is a way of coping as well. You know, there's been so much change in the last 6 months, and by doing less study, maybe that's a good thing for our student cohort as well. It's just not good for our student finances. That's the only issue.
That's true. We've got to hold on a bit longer, let's say, and rely on our alumni, especially. And Chakra, what about your students that go overseas, come abroad, or come back home, bring that knowledge and experience back to Saudi shores? How are you tracking their academic progress when they're overseas, when they're having these experiences, and how do you measure their satisfaction upon return?
there is a continuous communication between myself, my team, and the students, and probably we request a follow-up report on monthly basis from them, and then at the end of each academic semester. But the impact we're looking at the end of the day is how much practical experience the universities bring back to the that's why when we choose our partners, going back to partnerships, we concentrate a lot on the quality of the laboratories. So for example, I do scholarships in cybersecurity, and I choose the best, not the best university, but the university that has the best lab, as it is a very important side of their study. Now, going back to the online business, this makes this issue very difficult, really. But as I told you, at the end of the day, it is the impact at the workplace. And from the STC perspective, the more impact we have from certain institutions, you would find us renewing partnership contracts very quickly. For example, with the University of Michigan Ross School of Business, we've had 3 years partnership contract. And now the contract was renewed automatically 2 years ago. So it's 5 years of relation, and it will continue rolling as the impact is clear to us.
I might just add, we've also engaged in a lot of social media to help the isolation issue. So we've actually got a social platform called Amigo, and that helps students make connections and relationships across our whole community. And that's been an effective way of us trying to reduce the isolation of our not just international cohort, but also the domestic cohort, because they're in the same, they've got the same issue. And we found that's helped as well, just having a platform to bring people together.
Absolutely. I think using a lot more engagement online can certainly help for students on a daily basis, you know, just coffee check-ins, even cyber discos and things like that. Really important to keep the spirits up and the community factor coming through. So gentlemen, we've got a question that's come through from our studio audience. So just before we've probably got time for just this one question, and then we'll do a wrap up. And this question has to do with technology, in fact. So one of our lovely attendees has asked, how do you think technology might be able to help student mobility in times of COVID? There's an app out there called Go Passport coming through from Australia, where technology includes GPS tracking for contact tracing. And it sounds like a promising way to safely track students upon entry to Australia. If there is no vaccine that can come through quick enough, do we think that we can rely a bit more on technology, such as Go Passport and track and trace?
I might just add to that. I think our mobility team, our student mobility team, already have that kind of technology to track students in overseas countries, because one of the big issues for such a big university, we have students all over the world. So when there's a crisis, it's sometimes hard to try and find them, make sure they're okay. So we've actually introduced technology and GPS tracking to be able to track the students where they are in times of a crisis. Now, again, the students probably don't realise what we can do, but we do have this technology behind the scenes where we can find students and help them in case of an emergency. So I think this just would be an extension of some of the work we already do in our mobility space. And we could extend it to incoming cohorts.
Okay, great. So some good opportunities there. Yes, I've heard some good stories about some study abroad students from America that indeed they were being tracked by GPS and they had gone off course. And the advisor had discovered that they had gone into the border of Mexico, in fact, or something like this, and sent a frantic message, "Why are you in this country?" And they're like, "How did you know I was here?" "Oh, we're just visiting so-and-so's aunt, you know, and get back now." So it can have its advantages. And of course, with student safety coming first.
And we're actually investing more research and more resources into safety and health and safety for our mobility group. So we've actually hired someone just focuses on student safety in our mobility team. So I think that's just one of the drivers, and I think that will continue to happen as as we deal with the crisis.
Yeah, health and safety of students, and not just physical, but mental health as well, which we've explored, certainly coming to the forefront in terms of student decision making. Okay, any final thoughts before we sort of wrap up for the day, or get on with our day, depending on where we all are? Any final thoughts about your outlook for the months ahead? Any other success stories you'd like to share with us as a final closing opportunity?
I just think for us, it's just a wait and see how the government changes its policy on borders, whether we can find a vaccine, whether we can restart the campuses. So we're all on a little bit on tenterhooks at the moment. We're just hoping things do improve. So it's wait and see for us.
Yeah, we're hoping to.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, I would say that let's stay positive. Let's be optimistic. Yes, it's a pandemic. It's been around 1 year now, almost a year, but there are a lot of positive lessons, and there are a lot of I would say advantages we're drawing out of that. I'm quite positive that things at the end of 2021 probably will be much better than before. And the lessons we're learning are a lot. The expansion in technology literacy is huge, and also expansion in infrastructure, technological infrastructure all over the world is very aggressive, and this is a very positive issue we have to capitalize on.
Yeah, we're looking at the positives. We can't make any decisions on the unknowns, but our government is allowing 250 PhD students to return to the country to complete their studies as an initial start to bring back international students into the fold. We've had significant contributions from our own academics in response to COVID across the country in the media, which has been fantastic, to the extent where one of our academics is, I guess, has moved away from academia because she's now a minister in the government. But yeah, it's just looking forward as to not so much how will we get back to normal, but when we will get back to something that is what we like to do, which is educate.
Indeed, yes. Well, one other silver lining is that I think Australia and New Zealand have certainly, if your reputation wasn't already strong enough, it's gotten even stronger, I might venture to say, because the way that the situation has been handled down there has come off very calm and controlled, collective spirit, and I think that might perhaps sit in the minds of prospective students and parents going forward when we do all come out of this. So that is one positive thing. It might be limited now, but I think once things do start to open up, the situation should hopefully be much more flooding in. So we hope that you're prepared for these students that are all going to come your way.
Come on down.
Yes.
We want you.
I'm sure they're very eager. I think we all are. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for such an amazing panel today, for sharing your energy and your knowledge and your inspiring examples. Some lovely stories there coming through. I think that $1 million donation from Alumni is certainly a nice number we'll be thinking of in our hearts and minds going forward as well. Thank you very much to our attendees for your time and attention this morning, this afternoon, this evening, wherever you might be. Please don't forget that we've got one more panel that will come through on Friday. That's 3 p.m. UK time, for a nice way to round off the week. Let's say your final chance to ask questions to our panel and to get together and share some more stories. And that'll give us an insight into the scholarship scene in Latin America and in South Africa as well. So do keep us posted, keep those questions coming. And for those of you who are finishing your day, I hope you have a lovely evening. And for those of you who are getting into your summit meetings, good luck with the event, and we will see you all on Friday. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Good morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.